Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Life After Cult, and I'm not really going to have much of an intro other than to just say this is part 3 of the story of us. Wedding planning turned into something that was fun yet miserable at the same time. The fun parts really revolved around making my dress and thinking about actually being married by the end of it. The premarital counseling class that we were in seemed shallow and irrelevant to me. From my point of view, it was a whole lot of sessions that delved into what I would consider the shallow things that destroy marriages. Things like the toilet paper roll, the toothpaste roll, etc. I know I have a different vantage point, but quite frankly, all of those things seemed stupid and shallow. To be fair, I'm pretty sure looking back that the couple heading up this class were trying to get at the fact that many times those stupid surface level things often indicate deeper issues at play. To my naive ears though, it sounded ridiculous. Whether or not that was the case, we certainly did not directly touch on deeper issues or really go through anything that I believe would have been much more helpful in the long run. There was no talk on how to handle differences of opinions in finances, for example. I don't really remember anything on finances actually at all. I remember we briefly skimmed over conflict resolution, but it was all coming from one angle. That angle being that both partners came from a normal home. My reason for even talking about this is simply to say I wish that premarital counseling had been better, more personal. Matt and I both admitted since that neither of us felt it accomplished anything other than fulfilling the requirement our church had that we completed it before marriage. We were both relieved when the last class was over, stuck our books on the shelf, and moved forward. I threw myself into my wedding dress. Technically, I had started it before we were engaged, but now I felt free to finish it. I'm not entirely sure why I took so many pictures of my progress at that point, but I'm grateful I did. It's fascinating for me to look back at them now. My skills have grown and changed quite drastically, and my dream for the dress had been lace. But lace was too costly, so even though I settled for tulle, I am immensely proud of what I did. It was the budget that caused my first clash with my parents. They had given us a relatively small amount of money when it came to wedding planning. Having no plans to actually ask for more, I went through every mental hoop I could for cutting costs. This presented a problem, however, when I got to the photographer. A good friend and former roommate of mine was doing weddings and offered to photograph mine at a discount. Even with that discount, it was a third of the money we were given. I approached my parents one evening with the problem. Good photos was the one thing I really wanted, and anyone besides my friend was 3 times her cost. The yelling began. It was yelled that I was wasting money, that this was proof of my irresponsibility, that I couldn't budget worth anything, etc. This stung. I'm not entirely sure why. After all, that is what I was used to. But I had spent weeks leading up to this conversation researching photographers, cutting coupons for the fabric stores and the craft stores so that I could painstakingly and slowly purchase the supplies for my dress as well as the invitations and other things. I was doing everything myself to save every dollar I could. This included the coupon clipping and sales watching to get the flowers and the ribbon to make my own bouquets. Matt and I had even gone so far as to map out the time of day in which to get married so that we didn't have to pay for a dinner. My memory fails on what the fallout of that was. I don't remember how I handled it. In all likelihood, I yelled back and stormed out of the house. That's how things usually went down. I do remember, however, that following the confrontation with my parents was the first time I told Matt I wanted to elope. That my parents didn't believe me how expensive things were was clear. A few weeks later, in his normal tone of prideful arrogance, Dad mentioned that he had done his own research and could not believe how expensive everything was. Mom's tone was at least a little more sheepish when telling me that they had actually figured out how much I was saving and they decided to extend the budget for whatever the materials for the dress had cost. It wasn't much in the grand scope of things, but I took it. Still furious, though, that they couldn't even apologize for what had happened before. After that all settled down, the manipulation game started. I had asked all 3 of my sisters and my cousin to be my bridesmaids. My sister right under me was my maid of honor, but she was studying abroad during most of the planning process. This wasn't an issue with my cousin because obviously my mom couldn't tell her what to do. My 2 youngest underage sisters, however, were used as weapons. Whatever decision I made, I was reminded that my parents could just pull them from the wedding and not allow them to participate. This was a very effective tactic. She knew as well as I that both of them would be utterly devastated to not be allowed to participate. It was really more for them than for me that I had asked them to be my bridesmaids anyway. This was used against me for the style of dress as well as who could be doing what and how involved people would be in the ceremony. Also for, I didn't put this in my blog post, but also for my style that I wanted for my wedding dress as well. Matt truly did not believe that I was serious about eloping. He was also worried that his mom would be horribly hurt by us making that choice, so we went ahead with the wedding. Somewhere close to a month-ish out, my mom suddenly got the brilliant idea to turn my wedding day into a planned family reunion. Suddenly, I now had more details to bow to her every whim on. Everything about our day had to make sure it didn't mess with her family reunion that would be after our wedding, that we obviously wouldn't be there for. Matt was my ever-present rock through all of these ups and downs. I don't know how I would have made it to our wedding day with my sanity intact if he hadn't been that supportive. I put my marks in where I could so that there would be still something of me in that ceremony. We used a good friend of ours to officiate instead of our pastor. And I'm going to add here, my parents weren't happy with this one either, but I was able to at least pull this one off. Though not yet in a place mentally to process where our church fit into my damage or healing, I already felt a sense of betrayal with our pastor, and I knew I didn't want to ask him. Another friend was doing our music and working the sound booth, and I had him play an instrumental intro from a U2 song to walk me down the aisle instead of Here Comes the Bride. I don't really care how they thought about that one. I'm going to put this in there. I'm still proud of that particular decision. Our wedding planner was a lady from our church that I had known for most of my life. She has the kind of personality that is loud, bubbly, sugary sweet, and you don't forget her once you have met her. She also can command a room, and it is hard to say no to. On the day of rehearsal, as we were working through the ceremony, awesome ideas kept popping into her head about ways to make the ceremony more special for your parents. She was referring to both mine and Matt's, and while I was fine with doing all of this for Matt's, I had no desire to do it for mine. I didn't put this in the blog post, but I want to edit this here. I was going to turn down all of these ideas because of the fact that I couldn't rightfully do them for Matt's parents and not my own. However, she then went and talked to my mother, who they have been friends for as long as I've known them, and my mother got on board with it, and guess what? Manipulation. And I had no choice. I had no will left to fight. So whatever she came up with happened. From extra hugs for mom and dad during my walk down the aisle, to both our moms being given the honor to light our separate candles beside the unity candle at the start of the ceremony. I numbed myself to it all and kept my focus on Matt. That was what was important. I literally cannot talk today. I'm editing so much of this out. It didn't bother me. I repeated that to myself over and over till I had done an admirable job in convincing myself that it was true. There were so many times that my parents yelled at me, ridiculed me, and told me that I wasn't being responsible through all of this. I lost count. Truthfully, I'm actually grateful I don't remember the details of them all, A lot of what I have recorded here, I had to sit a while putting aside what I have always forced myself to focus on to make sure it is recorded as accurately as it can be. Matt and I learned more conflict resolution during the last 8 months before our wedding than we ever did sitting in a premarital class. We joked that we fought and made up more while dating than we did in the first 3 years of our marriage. Not that we are proud of the fighting, but we are proud that we tried to learn from it and use it to draw us closer to each other. The stress that I was under from my parents was playing a big role. To some extent, the thing I kept telling myself had multiple levels of truth in it. The most important thing at the end of that day was that we were husband and wife. Our marriage didn't need to be defined by the events of that day. So if you were to curl up for me with a chat and coffee, of course, and ask me, tell me about you and Matt and your wedding, you wouldn't hear most of this. You would hear about how we shocked his mom into silence, which is rare. I've only accomplished it twice. When we announced our engagement, I found out later he had told her nothing other than that we were dating. She was very clueless as to how serious we were. You would hear of the fun and crazy trips to another city to see my cousin, which included epic levels of near catastrophe, like setting her oven on fire and almost wrecking her husband's truck. Or you would hear of how we rushed through our reception, no one's fault, it just happened, got in our car for the farewell, pulled out of the church parking lot, looked at the clock, and almost turned and came back. Those and other fun memories like it are the ones I forced myself over the years to focus on, hoping somehow they would eventually erase all the others. I had succeeded mostly. But then Matt finally gets our little recording on his computer. The music starts, and all of those things that we didn't want are now staring at me in the face. My daughter wants to watch it. I don't want her to. I'm ashamed of how weak I was to cave. Okay, I'm going to say that was a sentence I wrote several years ago. I am actually not ashamed now, and I need to put that in there. I did what I had to do. And there is no shame in that. But there is also now a feeling that's new to me. Pride. I'm so proud of us. We made a choice to grow together through all of that mess, not grow apart. There was never a good kind of pride growing up. All pride was bad. So this is new to me. We've since talked about renewing our vows and planning an event with just the people that we want there. The ones that have invested in us, that really love us. Matt wants me to be able to make the dress with lace I actually wanted. We will see if that's in the future. It would be fun and special, no doubt. But I've come to the place of contentedness with us. We've defied so many odds, been through so many things that the world and life has thrown at us, and I'm proud. Proud, but also grateful. Grateful for the family that God has blessed me with that may not share blood, but it doesn't matter. Grateful that looking back, I can see little ways here and there that God made his presence known to us during all of that. Almost 15 years later, I am so thankful for the one thing that I don't regret is marrying my best friend. And I did update the year in my blog. It was, I think, 13 and a half years at that point. We are almost at 15 at this point. But on that note, that's the end of the blog. And the updates are, we will have a vow renewal. We don't know when. It's still going to cost money. And there's just a lot happening in our lives right now that is requiring money, on top of which we had an air conditioning catastrophe yesterday with water pouring out of our ceiling. So there's that fun. I don't know when we will be able to afford a renewal. But in the meantime, I have almost completely remade my dress, and my two channels are not going to converge too much. However, in this one instance, they will, and I will be sharing the video when I eventually get it up of me remaking my wedding dress which that as a sewing video will be on my sewing channel. So that is the foundation of me and Matt and our marriage. And yes, that was a lot to get through. But making my wedding dress has been extremely healing. It's turning into a dress that I will be very proud to hand off to my daughter one day if she still wants it. She has said that she wants it, but I couldn't give it to her the way it was. And yeah. So thank you for joining me for this video, and I will see you in the next one.